Right, grade 12. The next growth and development strategy that we are going to look at is AsgiSA. As I mentioned before, the RDP was used from 94 to 96, and then that was replaced by GEA, which was used from 1996 up to 2006. In 2006, it was replaced with AsgiSA. Okay, the abbreviation AsgiSA, it stands for Accelerated and Shared Growth Initiative for South Africa. The objective of AsgiSA, if you can remember this, they like to ask this quite often. The objective of AsgiSA was to halve poverty and unemployment in South Africa by 2014. Clearly, it is 2020 and unemployment and poverty was not halved, not in 2014 and not after that. So AsgiSA also failed as a strategy in that it didn't meet its objective. It was a tall order to begin with. It's impossible from 2006 up to 2014 to halve poverty and unemployment. It is just not attainable. Okay, but the plan was to halve poverty and unemployment. They would focus on 6 areas. The first area, again, is infrastructure investment. As I mentioned in the previous 2 videos with the RDP as well as the GEA strategy, infrastructure is always an area that they concentrate on because infrastructure obviously makes the economy work more efficiently. Okay, so the focus on infrastructure in terms of AsgiSA was on power generation and distribution, rail transport, harbors, and then an oil pipeline that was to be constructed. The problem, the blackouts, the load shedding, is something that started around the time of AsgiSA, when the government realized that they have expanded the electricity network. The demand for electricity has increased, but they did not increase the supply. All right, so they did not, for many years, since 94, they haven't expanded the generation power, the capacity of Eskom. So they didn't generate more power, but they were providing more power, supplying more power. So obviously this was a disaster waiting to happen. You cannot supply electricity unless you generate it in the first place. All right, so they started realizing then that there was capacity problems and they needed to build more power stations. All right, other focus areas includes roads, also water infrastructure and water supply, to also increase access of people to clean water, energy distribution, as I said, housing, schools, clinics, your social infrastructure, business centers, sports facilities, obviously in forecasting of 2010, right? We were hosting the World Cup, the Soccer World Cup in 2010. So they had to upgrade and expand the available sports facilities, which is also seen as infrastructure. Right, the second focus area, just to finish there quickly. The benefits of infrastructure investment, as I said, is to improve the capacity, increase the capacity of Eskom to generate power, to make the infrastructure be more efficient so that resources can get where they are needed, goods and services can get to the markets on time, workers can get to work on time, raw materials can be received on time to remove those bottlenecks. Okay, with infrastructure becoming more efficient, also it would increase the productivity in the economy, where we would produce things faster. We were no longer waiting for raw materials to be delivered. If the infrastructure works properly, productivity can also increase. Then we want to lower the cost of doing business in South Africa. Remember when we did supply side policies in chapter 2 with the new paradigm, as well as in this chapter, the whole idea is that if we want to increase supply, to increase economic growth, that we need to reduce the production cost of doing business, the production cost of businesses. So one of the things that the focus is on is that a lot of the infrastructure is under the control of the government, and some of the infrastructure are just inefficient and untrustworthy, like the railways, and others are there and it's reliable, but it is very expensive. All right, so the focus on infrastructure is also to help make it more efficient and to reduce the cost of infrastructure so that the production cost of businesses can decrease and their supply can increase, which would give us the growth that we want. They also wanted to stimulate the small business sector and spin off for suppliers. Obviously, you'll see the focus as we go through more strategies. They're focusing very much on the SMMEs, so that because obviously that's there to increase competition. Now, we need to increase competition so that we encourage the establishment of small businesses that could grow into big businesses to be competition for other businesses. And then increasing the demand for goods and services, also because remember we stimulate from both the demand side and the supply side. Stimulating or improving infrastructure, making infrastructure cheaper and more reliable is obviously stimulating from the supply side. But at the same time, when we are paying people to build that infrastructure, they will be earning money. It's government spending, which obviously will also stimulate the demand for goods and services. Okay, the second focus area is called sector investment. Okay, the idea is to identify sectors that has the potential for growth and then focus government initiatives on the sectors that they have identified so that the growth in these sectors can spill over also into other sectors. The objective is to promote private sector investment, so for the money not to come from the government, but encourage private sector investment, whether it's local investment, foreign investment, but to invest in priority sectors. The three sectors that have been identified for priority attention is business process outsourcing, call centers basically, and then tourism and biofuels. All right, the reason why they chose these sectors, first of all, they are labor intensive. Okay, if you think call centers, it is labor intensive. It's not something that can be done through technology. People physically have to sit there and talk to other people. They have to make the phone calls. They have to provide the information. It is labor intensive. Same with tourism. Tourist is a labor intensive industry. You cannot, if you think in a hotel, the receptionist is a person, the waiters are people, the cooks, the chefs are people, the taxi drivers transporting these people, the entertainers, everybody is labor. It's labor intensive. So it has the spin off that it will create lots of jobs, which obviously through AsgiSA they want to halve poverty and unemployment. So they would obviously focus on labor intensive industries so that they could reach their objective of decreasing unemployment. Okay, another reason why they chose these sectors is that it is rapidly growing worldwide. Obviously, before COVID-19, tourism was the fastest growing industry in our country and also internationally. COVID-19 obviously put a spanner in the works for now, but the industry will recover again. Okay, so it is a fast growing, it has potential for growth worldwide. It is suitable for South African circumstances. You'll see in the chapter 13, we're going to look precisely at why South Africa is such a preferred tourist destination. Now we've got the big five, we've got the suitable climate. People like to come here with the sun and the heat, experience that. We have lots of fauna and flora sites. So we have got Table Mountain, we've got beautiful things for people to see. We've got adventure tourism, we have the beaches, we have commercial activities happening here. We've got the different cultures that people come and see. There's lots of reasons why tourism is so very successful in South Africa. And then lastly, it is open to opportunities for BBBE and small business development. All of these sectors, they don't require a massive capital outlay. All right, so if you think tourism, you buy a combi taxi type car and you start taking tourists around to the touristy sites, right? You start a B&B at your house. It is not necessarily only the big hotels with lots of money that can be successful in these industries. It creates opportunities for smaller businesses to be established because it doesn't require such a large capital outlay initially. All right, after those three priority sectors, the next ranked priority sectors are chemicals, metals beneficiation, that's processing, our creative industry, because as I said, we've got lots of different cultures and things in our country. Each of them comes with their own creativity. Clothing and textiles, we've got durable consumer goods, and then wood, pulp, and paper. The third focus area is skills and education development throughout, with the RDP as well as through GEAR. Skills and education development has always been a focus area because in South Africa we have a huge undersupply, shortages of skilled labor, and obviously that places a big restriction for economic growth and development. We know that skilled people are more productive than unskilled people. educated people are more productive than uneducated people. So obviously we need to increase productivity, we increase the amount of work that our workers are able to do, and automatically the GDP will increase and we can stimulate economic growth and development. But we need to create skills. We've got a huge oversupply of unskilled workers. That also makes it very difficult for them to find a job. So providing skills will create economic growth, but it will also assist in job creation. It's easier to find a job if you've got skills, if you've been educated to do something, you've got some qualification. All right, now through AsgiSA, two other strategies which we will look at later was also launched to align the educational sector with the labor needs of the economy. We have the NSDS, which is the National Skills Development Strategy, and then AsgiSA, which is the Joint Initiative for Priority Skills Acquisition. We will look at these two in detail later. Okay, the next focus area is second economy interventions. By second economy, we mean informal sector. All right, another word for second economy is informal sector. So mainly where we can find the poor people, people that do not earn a lot of money, a lot of them are involved in the informal sector, and they are completely excluded from the potential wealth that can be created in the formal sector. In the informal sector, nobody gets involved in the informal sector by choice, and nobody gets involved in the informal sector and builds up this massive wealth from being involved in the informal sector. Most of the people in the informal sector are getting involved there purely to survive, to have some kind of income. Instead of no income, they create opportunities for themselves in the informal sector purely as a survival mechanism. Everybody would want a formal job instead. A formal job where the industries are regulated and wages are regulated and they get paid proper money. Informal sector is very, very unpredictable. Right, so what we are saying, we have to reduce the gap between the first and the second economy, the formal and the informal sector. All right, so what are the strategies that we are going to use? How are we going to use this? How are we going to intervene in the informal sector and get people involved in the mainstream economy? First of all, we need to address access to finance. Right, because there's lots of people that would like to start small businesses, but they lack access to financing. They do not qualify for bank loans. They do not have own capital of their own. They don't have enough money to start a business on their own. So if we can give access to finance to small businesses, if the government, public expenditure, if government money, if tax money could be allocated in such a way that we subsidize small businesses, we help small businesses so that they can be established in labor-intensive sectors so that it can create lots and lots of jobs. Obviously, then people can start formal businesses instead of playing around there in the informal sector. Right, we also need affirmative procurement policies to give small businesses more opportunities. We did speak about affirmative procurement in grade 11. Procurement policy is basically the policy that regulates who gets to get government contracts. So when the government opens up a tender process, businesses are supposed to hand in tenders, basically quotes as to what they would like to do the job. If the government wants a school to be built and they open the tender process, different construction companies would hand in tenders or quotes basically saying that this is how much they will charge. Now, if they build the school, this is how much it will cost, etc., etc. Now, affirmative procurement means that when the contracts are given to businesses, small businesses should be given preference, and businesses that are BEE compliant, so businesses that are owned by Black or disadvantaged people, should be given preference. And I can't remember what the percentage is, but basically, if there's a small BEE compliant business, the government has to accept the lowest quote, the tender that gives them the lowest value. That is the one that they should choose because taxpayers' money, the more they spend on the school, the less money they have for other stuff. So if they take the cheapest tender, then obviously it leaves them with more money to spend elsewhere. But the procurement policy, the affirmative procurement policy states that even if a small BEE compliant business is slightly more expensive, it's like 10% or something more expensive, there is a definitive percentage, then the tender can still be given to them because it is seen as redistribution and supporting the small business sector. All right, so smaller businesses are given opportunities even if they are slightly more expensive. They will be given the advantage because then it gives that small business the opportunity to grow. Then it's very important that government actually pays for procured goods and services on time. Okay, this is a complete failure on the government. Once that small business has built the school, that they be paid for the work that they have done. That the government doesn't stall and not pay them, wait 6 months and wait 6 months, because small businesses cannot carry that financial load unless the government pays them on time. All right, so when they enter into a contract, the government should pay for the goods and services that is delivered to them. They should pay on time. All right, also creating labor-intensive infrastructure projects. We know that infrastructure is a focus area of AsgiSA as well. And when infrastructure is expanded, it should be done in labor-intensive ways so that, again, it can create jobs for unemployed people. And then lastly, the focus is on expanding marginalized people's access to opportunities, especially women and young people. The focus very much is on the empowerment of women because women was marginalized in the past as well as young people. Now, the unemployment rate under young people, people that have just finished qualifying, they've just left school, they find it very, very difficult to find a job. So the idea should be that to give these marginalized people access to opportunities so that they can satisfy their needs. All right, the next focus area or the key area is government intervention, macroeconomic issues. All right, now, intervention in terms of the macroeconomy is limited because it focuses more on microeconomic environments. But what we should be focusing on also, and it was also a focus area of GEAR, is to reduce the volatility and the overvaluation of the currency. Remember, even under GEAR, we said we need to make our businesses more competitive through having a slightly depreciated rand. Now, we want the rand exchange rates to be stable. That is what reducing volatility means. We don't want it to fluctuate all over the place. And we can't have a rand that is too strong because we would like to increase our exports so that injections can come into the economy. Other countries do not buy from us if our rand is too strong. We need a slightly depreciated currency. Then we also need to make sure that our fiscal and monetary policies work together to produce sustained economic growth. We cannot use expansionary monetary policy and then restrictive fiscal policy, for example. Okay, we have to, the two policies have to be aligned so that it works together towards the same goal. We need to improve government's budgeting, okay? Obviously decrease unnecessary expenditures and increase revenue within reason so that the government doesn't have to borrow. Okay, remember, we do not want a budget deficit that is too high. And then management of government expenditure, as I said, reduce unnecessary spending. The government needs to be accountable. It needs to be transparent. There shouldn't be misallocation of funds. There shouldn't be corruption. They should weed out the corruption so that the money allocated in the budget actually goes to the areas that it is intended for. They do not have, they should watch their expenditure, that there's no overspending. And if money was allocated for something, that money goes for that specific something. Otherwise, the objectives are not going to be reached. Okay, the last focus area of AsgiSA is governance and institutional interventions. Governance is basically the running of the country, the way that the government runs the country. As I said, we need to be, the government must be made accountable. That we have to keep them responsible for responding better to the public. They are accountable to us. They have to explain to us where they're going to spend the money, why are they doing what they are doing, why are their strategies not successful. They are accountable. They are supposed to run this country properly so that we can have economic growth and development. If it's not happening, they should explain to us why. All right. The intention is to keep interventions to a minimum. All right, so we don't want the government to interfere in the economy too much, but they interfere only if they need to improve efficiency. If the market fails and there's inefficiency, then the government has to intervene. They cannot leave it, but they shouldn't intervene in everything all the time. All right, so issues that has to be addressed is increase the efficiency of local and provincial governments to do service delivery, because there is a shortage of skills. Now, we did discuss this in Chapter 3 as well. The provincial and local governments, the municipalities especially, they have a lack of capacity because they find it very difficult to find qualified people that is willing to go and work at the government. Accountants, for example, they're specifically accountants. You don't find them at the municipalities because they prefer to work in the private sector where they are paid more. So it's very difficult for different municipalities to be accountable and to be financially secure because they don't have the skill to do that. So it should be addressed, right? They should pay salaries that is high enough. They should make sure that they can employ qualified people and retain them. Okay, because the big problem is also once they found a qualified person, the people don't stay very long because there's better opportunities for them elsewhere. So appoint them and retain them. All right, then the AsgiSA should be a standing item at Cabinet when they have their parliamentary discussions. Every time that Parliament meets, they shouldn't have just launch AsgiSA and then 10 years down the line, okay, was it successful or not? It should be a standing item up for discussion at every single parliamentary discussion. They should be saying, right, how are we progressing? What have we reached? Where are we in terms of reaching these objectives? What is working? What is not working? So that if it is not working, they can find out and they can intervene so that it can start working. Then the government should also review all the development finance institutions, okay, which includes the IDC, which is the Industrial Development Corporation, the Land Bank, they provide loans and financing to farmers, the DBSA is the Development Bank of Southern Africa, and then the National Development Agency. All of these are finance institutions that make loans available for development purposes to countries or bigger businesses. IDC provides financing for bigger businesses. They don't play with the SMMEs. The Land Bank, as I said, for infrastructure. The DBSA provides financing to Southern African countries for infrastructure specifically. All right, so review them and see that they are doing what they are supposed to be doing, that they are doing their job, they're providing financing to the appropriate situations so that growth and development can happen. And then lastly, we need to address unnecessary bureaucratic delays in investment projects. All right, remember we spoke about bureaucracy. It's the rules and procedure that everybody have to stick to before something gets done. It's a lengthy procedure. For once the government has decided to, for example, build a school, they don't just decide to build a school and then building construction starts the next day. It is a whole process of getting permission and getting the financing. It takes a very, very, very long time. So we should remove those unnecessary bureaucratic delays. We understand why it's there, otherwise corruption is going to increase, obviously, but we need to make it efficient. If there's delays for months and months delays, then obviously it is not being efficient. The money's been approved. Why is the school not being built? Because we're waiting for this and we're waiting for that, etc., etc. All right. So we have to look at provincial planning and zoning systems. Okay, zoning systems will determine, which areas are zoned for business or residential or whatever the case may be, as well as the environmental impact assessment. Okay, remember when we did the cost-benefit analysis, we said that any construction, any major construction, they have to do an environmental impact study, and that obviously also takes time. But also they need to evaluate the system and make sure that it gets done quickly, instantly, and that it's actually followed up on and not left until the last minute. Okay, if we just look last of all at the evaluation of AsgiSA, what was its achievements, what was its failures? All right, achievements, the first one, there was an increase in gross fixed capital formation by the public sector, which proves to us that a lot of money was invested in infrastructure, the maintenance and the improvement and expansion of infrastructure. There was a lot of investment by the public sector. And then the second economy strategy, the informal sector, has helped to decrease unemployment, but only slightly. Okay, definitely the objective of AsgiSA was to halve unemployment. They did not reach that objective. They did not halve it. They did decrease it slightly. Right, so on the failure side, again, persistent high levels of unemployment. They did not halve unemployment, particularly for the less skilled young black people. As I said, youth unemployment is very high. So they were not successful in terms of creating jobs for vulnerable people. And then again, widespread poverty. They were supposed to halve poverty and reduce the inequalities, and that didn't happen. Poverty got worse and inequality got even worse. Instead of solving the problem, somehow they made it worse.